If you're someone who loves revenge stories where justice is always served, stay with me. The conference room door slammed open hard enough that the glass walls rattled. Every head at the table turned. A stack of printed reports slid across the polished wood and stopped directly in front of me. Explain this. The voice was calm. Too calm. I looked down. Red markers circled numbers on the page like fresh wounds. $184,000. Missing. Someone at the table inhaled sharply. Then another voice spoke from across the room. Tyler approved the transfer, he said, leaning back slightly in his chair. It's logged under his credentials. The silence that followed felt heavier than the accusation. 9 people sat around that table. 9 executives. 9 people staring at me like they had just discovered something rotten. I flipped the page slowly. The timestamp jumped out first. 8:42 p.m. Then the login ID. Mine. For a second, the room tilted, because I knew something they didn't. I hadn't even been in the building at 8:42 p.m., but before I could say a word, the same voice spoke again. Smooth, confident. Well, he asked. I looked up, and that was the moment I realized something far worse than a mistake had just happened. Someone wasn't accusing me. Someone was burning my entire career to hide something bigger. My name is Tyler Brennan, and the man sitting across that table had just made the worst mistake of his life. No one defended me. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the accusation. The silence. People I'd worked beside for years suddenly found the table fascinating. One executive cleared his throat. Tyler, he said carefully, do you want to respond? I looked down at the report again. The numbers were real. The transaction existed. But the way it appeared, something about it felt engineered. I pushed the report back across the table. I'd like to review the system logs before I say anything, I said. Across from me, Daniel Cross smiled slightly, just slightly, but I caught it, hooked for next scene. That smile didn't look like confidence. It looked like relief. When the meeting ended, the hallway felt different, quieter. 2 co-workers stopped talking the moment I passed them. Another one avoided eye contact completely. Rumors move fast in an office, but accusations move faster. By the time I reached my desk, 3 messages were waiting in my inbox asking if everything was okay. They weren't really asking. They were confirming what they had already heard. I opened the report again. 8:42 p.m. A memory surfaced. Last Thursday, 8:42 p.m. I had been eating takeout on my couch watching a baseball game. Now, apparently I was transferring 6 figures out of client account. Hooked for next scene, which meant someone had used my login. I stayed late that night, long after the office lights dimmed. The IT portal showed login histories, usernames, times, machines used. My account had logged in at 8:41 p.m. Remote session, internal network. From inside the building, I leaned back slowly, because that meant one thing. Whoever used my account was sitting at a computer inside our office, and only a handful of people had access after hours. The next morning, Daniel stopped by my desk. Rough meeting yesterday, he said sympathetically. I forced a polite smile. Yeah. He leaned against the cubicle wall. You know, I almost didn't catch it, he continued. The transfer. Almost. I studied him quietly. How did you notice it? I asked. Oh, I was reviewing the quarterly summaries. Something in his tone felt rehearsed. Too neat, too ready, like he had practiced that explanation before saying it. By Friday, the rumors had hardened into facts. People weren't saying Tyler might have made a mistake. They were saying Tyler moved the money. Someone had pushed that narrative hard, and I knew exactly who. But accusing someone without proof is career suicide. So instead, I started documenting everything. The next discovery came 3 days later. Another transfer, smaller, $27,000. Approved under my credentials again. This time the timestamp read 9:12 p.m. I wasn't even surprised, because now I knew something the scammer didn't. My account activity was being logged automatically. Every click, every screen, every machine used. And the machine used for the transfer wasn't mine. The login originated from workstation C17. I stared at the screen, because I knew exactly whose desk that was. Daniel Cross, which meant one of two things was happening. Either Daniel was the unluckiest man in the building, or he was the one running the scam. Most people would have confronted him immediately, demanded answers, thrown the evidence on the table. But accusations without context are easy to dismiss. So I stayed quiet and let him keep going, because scammers make one mistake over and over again. They get comfortable. A week later, the pattern revealed itself. Client funds weren't disappearing outright. They were being moved, temporary holding accounts, then routed again 2 days later, like someone washing money through a maze of transfers. I leaned back in my chair slowly, because this wasn't sloppy theft. This was a system, and it had probably been happening for months. Daniel bought a new car. 2 weeks later, he mentioned putting an offer on a house. Casually, like it was nothing, but everyone in the department knew roughly what everyone else made, and his salary didn't stretch that far. Not unless something else was funding it. One evening, an accountant named Michael Harper stopped by my desk. He looked nervous. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "Sure." He hesitated. "Those transfers, did you actually approve them?" I shook my head. His shoulders dropped slightly. "I thought so," because apparently he had seen something strange too. Michael showed me a set of invoices, client charges that didn't match the services billed, tiny discrepancies, the kind most people would overlook. But when those small gaps repeated across dozens of accounts, they added up to almost $300,000. Eventually, the company noticed. An internal audit was announced. Quietly, but word spread. Daniel didn't seem worried. In fact, he doubled down on the narrative. "Hope they figure out what happened," he said loudly one afternoon, while looking directly at me. But I was still collecting evidence. 2 nights later, someone accessed the system again. 11:03 p.m. Multiple files opened, then deleted. I watched the activity log update in real time. Daniel had finally realized the audit was closing in, and he was trying to erase the trail. 2 weeks later, we were back in the same conference room, same table, same executives. The audit report sat in the center. Daniel spoke first. "I think we all know where this is going," he said calmly. I almost admired the confidence. Almost. The CEO turned to me. "Tyler," he said, "is there anything you'd like to add before we conclude?" For the first time in weeks, I spoke. "Yes." And I placed a folder on the table. Inside the folder were printouts, login records, machine IDs, time-stamped access logs. The room went silent as the executives flipped through them. "Workstation C17, I said quietly. "Daniel's computer." Someone across the table looked up sharply. Daniel's smile faded. I slid another sheet forward. "This shows when my credentials were used." I continued. Every time it happened, the system was accessed from Daniel's workstation. One executive leaned forward. "And the money?" I flipped the final page. A transaction chain. Client accounts. Temporary holding accounts. Daniel's personal shell account. The room went completely still. Daniel tried to speak, but the words didn't come easily anymore. This is being misinterpreted." The CEO raised a hand. "Security will escort you out," he said quietly. Daniel's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. For a second, he looked at me, really looked, like he was trying to understand how the trap had closed around him. But by then it was already over. A week later, my reputation was restored. The executives apologized. There were even discussions about a promotion, but something inside me had shifted. Because once you watch how easily people believe the worst about you, you see things differently. 3 months later, I accepted an offer from another firm. Better position, better leadership. And on my last day, as I packed the final box for my desk, I realized something important. Daniel didn't lose everything because I exposed him. He lost everything because his own arrogance convinced him he was smarter than everyone else. Sometimes revenge doesn't require shouting. Sometimes all you have to do is step aside and let the truth catch up. In a world full of noise, Thank you for pausing to sit with a story today. If you value timeless revenge stories, you are warmly invited to subscribe. I look forward to sharing another revenge story by Emperor. In a world full of noise, thank you for pausing to sit with a story today. If you value timeless revenge stories, elder fraud revenge and scammer justice, workplace karma and toxic boss, takedowns, betrayal exposed, and AIDA style, moral dilemma stories where the bad guys always lose, you are warmly invited to subscribe, like, share, and comment your thoughts. I look forward to sharing another new revenge story episode by Emperor next week, Thursday.